Welcome to the Deconstructing Data podcast and live stream. I'm Jessie Lezak, fractional CMO at BDEX, along with David Finkelstein, BDEX's founder and CEO. It's been a couple weeks, David. We had other Davids in for us last week with Julie Matson. So it's good to be back. You went out of town. Did you have a nice trip?
I was in Costa Rica. Yes, I had a very nice, relaxing trip, and it's good to be back. But it was definitely good to unplug for a while. So that was fun.
Yes, very well deserved. Glad you got to go. And I was at Chili Palooza, which is Chili Piper's event, and excited. I was nominated for a CMO award for the work I did at BDEX.
Nice,
And
and congratulations.
thank you so
Absolutely.
much. Yeah, I was excited to be there, and it was a really awesome event. They had different workshops where you could go in and people were sharing their workflows, their AI workflows. So you could literally see what other marketers were building in Claude and ChatGPT. Mostly Claude is what we see, but I think I was kind of the outlier, still using ChatGPT from what I found. But yeah, there's just a lot of interesting things that you can do and you can build in this age of AI as a marketer. But the common theme, like we always find at Deconstructing Data, is having the human in the loop and keeping things authentic. And, we got to just make sure we're using it as a tool. But I digress, because we're going to be talking a lot about data and data privacy today with a really awesome guest. Today on Deconstructing Data, we are thrilled to welcome Donata Stroink-Skillred. She's the co-founder and president of Termageddon. And Termageddon is a privacy policy generator. I was telling her pre-show, I've actually used it before, but she is also a privacy attorney. So excited to welcome you on the show. Thanks for being here, Donata.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely, Donata. We're glad to have you on the show. We're excited to get right into our topics. But first, I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself to our viewers and listeners. Give them a chance to learn a little bit about you, your story, what led you to become co-founder of Termageddon, and what you guys are doing for your clients today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Donata, and I was, many years ago, I was in private practice after I graduated from law school, and I was actually working with web designers, writing contracts for them for their relationships with their clients. And one thing that I noticed is that, a lot of their clients didn't have privacy policies or terms of service for their site. And their clients would ask me, can you help me draft these? And I said, sure. And I noticed it was a very repetitive, boring process. And this was before all the privacy laws that we have today. So it was before even GDPR. And I noticed that I was asking them very similar questions, like what data are you collecting? What are you doing with that data? Who are you sharing it with? And then I had these templates that I would Frankenstein together into their policies. And it was just a very repetitive, boring process in my mind. And I met my husband, who was running a web agency at the time, and he would build sites for clients, and they would ask him, what do I do for a privacy policy? Can you write one for me? And he's like, I'm not really comfortable doing that because I'm not a lawyer. And we were just kind of sharing our frustrations over dinner one night. And that's how we decided to come up with Termageddon, which is a website policies generator. So we generate privacy policies, cookie consents, terms of service, all that stuff. And then also update them as the laws change. So whenever there's new privacy laws that are passed or existing laws are amended, we can automatically update customers' policies for them. So I'm a privacy attorney, and then outside of work, I'm also a fellow at the American Bar Foundation. I chair the American Bar Association's e-privacy committee, and I'm also a board member of the ABA's Rule of Law Initiative. And I guess keeping that in mind, I know we'll talk about privacy today. I'm not providing legal advice, so yeah.
Well, I love that founder story. That's awesome. It's always interesting to hear how people start their businesses, and just a great story. But data privacy is something that we talk about a lot on this show. So it'll be really interesting. It's something that we've never really dug into with an attorney. So I'm looking forward to this. So our first topic, collecting data and privacy and compliance. with privacy and compliance. Love to get your take on this.
Sure. So to start us off, there's so many misconceptions out there about privacy and who needs privacy policies and who needs to worry about privacy. Talking to so many small business owners about this, they don't even think that their website collects personal data. So to start us off, personal data is any information that could identify somebody or any information relating to an identified person. And so these are things like names, emails, phone numbers, physical addresses, IP addresses, things like that. And most modern websites nowadays do collect personal data. So if you have features like contact forms, email newsletter subscription forms, e-commerce, you have analytics or advertising, even things like YouTube and Vimeo videos and Google Maps on your site will collect data. And really, there's nothing inherently wrong with collecting this data, but there are certain requirements that you need to meet because this data is protected by privacy laws. And privacy laws are sort of unique in the sense that they protect consumers and not individuals. So what that means is that privacy laws outside of your state or country can apply to you, even if you're not located there as a business. So, if your website is collecting personal data, you should be aware of these privacy laws existing. The fact that they can apply to you, they do apply to even small businesses, they can apply to nonprofits, and privacy laws are enforced against small businesses as well. So, they've been fined and sued for non-compliance. So you need to make sure that if your website is collecting personal data, that you're following those requirements, that you're having the proper policies in place, that you're obtaining consent for setting certain trackers if you need to do so, and that you're offering individuals with privacy rights as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, like I said, this is something that comes up a lot with on the podcast because we talk about data. And so all of that data that's collected across the ad tech and martech ecosystem is all tied to some person. And so everyone has to adhere to these varying levels of privacy regulations. And that's sort of my next question is like, how do you keep up with all this? Because just like we have to, when I see that something has changed, we have to go back to our attorney and we have to ask them, to take a look at it and update it. I've never used Termageddon, but now that you're talking about it, I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe I could be saving some money and some headaches. So I'd love to learn more about how you guys are tackling all of these constant changes and all these different states having different regulations and not having one sort of federal governing regulation to cover data privacy.
Yeah. So, great point that you bring up no federal regulation. So, in the US, we have federal privacy laws for certain sectors like healthcare information, financial information, children's information, but there's no federal privacy law governing the information normally collected through websites or through marketing or advertising and things like that. And that's why we're seeing this large patchwork of privacy laws in the US, where each state is proposing and passing their own laws. And what happens with that is these laws do not necessarily overlap all the time. The requirements are not the same. They can require you to do different things, offer different rights, different policy disclosures, things like that, which makes it really difficult for businesses to have to comply with these. So what we do and how Termageddon is different from some of our competitors is that we start the policy generation process with a privacy law identifier. So that actually helps the software determine which laws apply to you and therefore what disclosures your policies need to contain. Because the privacy policy is not just random legalese. It's actually based on privacy laws because they literally have a list and they say, this is what your privacy policy needs to include. So that's what those are based on. So we start off with a privacy law identifier. Then we ask you the questions needed to generate those required disclosures. And then we give you the policy text and the embed codes. So the embed code is what goes onto your policies page. On your site, displays the policy text and allows us to update those policies. Now, in terms of tracking, so we use a lot of different tools to track privacy bills. One of the main tools is LexisNexis StateNet. You set up it's kind of like Google alerts for lawyers. So you set up your search terms, like some of mine are privacy policy, privacy notice. And anytime there's a new bill introduced with that term, it will send me an alert. The International Association of Privacy Professionals helps track bills. So does the American Bar Association. I also get alerts from attorney generals in every single state, which means my email inbox is a mess because they don't allow you to parse by topic. So whenever they send any alerts on any topic, you get an email. So you have to kind of parse through those. But those are really the main ways in which we gain information as to what bills are being proposed. And then you track those either on StateNet or Legiscan. And then, you get an alert at each stage. So, pretty far in advance whenever something is going to get close to passing, at least in most states. Some states you get, 30 days before it goes into effect, and that's all you get. But other states you get like a year or two, if that's how they have it set up. And then once it's passed into law, that's when we do the updates before the effective date.
Yeah, so it's a lot to keep up with.
It is. It really is. Yeah, there's so many bills out there. It's crazy. And, a lot of them pass, but a lot of them die out through the process too. So, it's just kind of a matter of keeping track of those things and watching them closely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Any
that's
guesses or opinions? Like, what's the real? What do you think realistically is going to happen again this year? We're just going to keep waiting.
In terms of like a federal privacy law,
Mm-hmm.
I can almost bet that we will not get one this year or anywhere in the near future. I mean, we have a hard time keeping the government open in the first place, much less passing laws. So there's a lot of different reasons why these federal bills don't pass: preemption, private right of action, consumer rights, enforcement, all of those things. So there's a lot of things to argue about with these. And yeah, unfortunately, we don't have one, and I don't think we'll have one anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what drives me nuts is like all the different states and the different state regulations, as a data company, we have to register with each of these states. And so the more states that put in their own policies, their own regulations, the more states we end up having to register with and tracking all that and paying for, and so on and so on.
Yeah, I mean, the purpose of that is really to allow consumers to figure out who to contact to exercise their rights. Like, for example, request deletion or don't sell my data or things like that.
Yep.
But the main issue is that the consumer doesn't know who holds their data. So what happens in a lot of these registries is you have a registry of 5,000 companies. Well, if a consumer doesn't want their data to be used or sold, they have to contact all of these companies individually because they don't really know who holds their data. So I would say with all the different state privacy laws that we have, the ability to actually exercise your privacy rights, it's pretty difficult still.
Yeah, for sure. It's a constant maze.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to jump into our next topic, marketing tools and data privacy risks. Speaking of just a high volume of companies, the marketing tools out there, especially given now with AI, it's like I feel like there's 1,000 new marketing tools that come out every day. It's just insane. And so this is going to be an interesting topic, with each of these marketing tools. Let's talk about what does that mean as far as data privacy risks?
Sure. So like you said, there's 1,000 new marketing tools each day, and half of them do the same thing.
Right.
That's already existed for many, many years. Maybe there's just like a slight feature change on some of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I understand that companies need to use marketing tools to grow their business, right? That's just the reality of the situation. What I don't think that a lot of companies realize is the fact that these marketing tools, number one, can subject them to privacy laws that they were never subjected to in the first place. So let's say I take a website with no Google Analytics. So I take a website for a florist in Chicago. No Google Analytics, no advertising, no anything. And then that website installs analytics and advertising, let's say, for example. Well, all of a sudden, if a website visitor from the EU goes onto their site, they're tracking that website user's behavior, making that business subject to GDPR, for example. So a lot of these tools can actually subject a business to new laws that they weren't previously subject to. And it can also open up a lot of compliance risks. So for example, right now in California, there's been a lot of lawsuits under the California Invasion of Privacy Act, where businesses are tracking website visitors from California through tools like analytics, advertising, heat mapping, all of that kind of stuff, without obtaining their prior consent. And these businesses are getting sued for large amounts of money, $50,000, $60,000, $100,000, just for tracking and placing those cookies on their device without their consent. So they're becoming more and more high risk. So, something to consider, first of all, is if you're not using these marketing tools, you should remove them from your website. If I had $1 for every time I spoke to a business owner and I said, okay, your website has Google Analytics, and they're like, what? I had no idea. I never looked at this data. I don't even know how to log in. Removing those tools or replacing them with privacy-friendly alternatives that don't track as much data or that don't sell it down the road, that's definitely a really good thing to consider, because that will reduce your risk by a lot, is just removing those tools altogether if you're not using them. Or if you have to use them, obtaining proper consent, providing the proper disclosures, and making sure that the consumer has the option to opt out of those services if they don't want to be tracked anymore. So they shouldn't be firing without the individual's consent. Consent should be proper. You should have an accept and a decline button with equal prominence. You should not have a giant accept button and a little tiny decline button. And then if a person, let's say they accept those cookies or they reject them, have an option to be able to withdraw their consent or provide their consent afterwards. I also want to say, I've been on sites before where you can't browse the website or you can't submit your information, you can't buy anything until you agree to be tracked through these marketing tools. I'd really encourage people to consider, what is the actual purpose of your business? Like, the purpose of your business is to make sales, not to collect data through analytics. I mean, unless that's like your actual business, in which case I get it. But for most businesses, like, you're trying to sell your goods and services, not to gain analytics data. Like, that's not your end goal. So making sure that people can still purchase, view the site, contact you, do all those things without having to agree to be tracked.
No, that's great advice. In fact, I just wrote that down because I think one of the easy things that everybody should do, you said, and I just want to sort of reiterate this to make people realize, a lot of times when you create a website, whoever created your website, uses all of these tools. They just install all these tools thinking that you're going to want to track everything. And so I think that's a really good idea. Do an assessment of what tools you're actually using and remove tools that you're not using. I mean, I've been to websites where you've gone and done if you go into developer tools and you can see kind of what is being used by the website. And there's just hundreds and hundreds of different JavaScripts running, pulling, cookies from dozens and dozens and dozens of sites. And a lot of this stuff, I find it hard to believe that they really need all of those things. And so I think that there's a lot of scenarios where it's exactly what you're saying, where tools were installed for one reason or another, and all of that tracking still exists on the site, whether you're using it or not. And so removing that, I think, is a good sort of easy first step that people should take note of.
Yeah, there's people, businesses who ran Facebook ads 5 years ago, and they have zero intention of running ads again. Their campaigns have ended. They're done with that. And then the Facebook pixel is still running, for years on end for no reason.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And and that's one of the worst ones ever that you should have on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's slowing down the speed of your website. And speed is extremely important for SEO now. I mean, yeah, there's a ton of reasons to take that down. It's a really good point. Yeah, I probably am guilty myself now. I'm thinking, oh, what's on my website? Yeah, no. So marketing tools and data privacy risks, any other marketing tools? I mean, that's a really good example, but any others that people might not be thinking of?
Yeah, heat mapping is a really big one. Things like, even when you think about it, like HubSpot, email marketing lists can be a big one too.
Mm,
So a lot of businesses, if you had contact with a business, like let's say I make an appointment to discuss, I don't know, like flooring or something like that, they automatically will add you to an email marketing list, even though you never subscribe to an email marketing list, right? And that means your data is being shared with the email marketing vendor, it's being shared with the email service provider, things like that, without consent or anything like that. So you definitely want to make sure to obtain consent separately for email marketing. You want to make sure that your policies have the right disclosures as to sharing data. You want to allow people to opt out. It's really interesting how difficult businesses make this. There's one site that I will not name, but you have to check about 50 check boxes to opt out of email marketing from them. Yeah.
yikes.
Like, don't do that. If people don't want your emails and you keep sending it to them, they're not going to read them, and they're going to just delete them, and they're not going to buy from you. A recent scourge almost is SMS text messaging, where businesses sign people up for SMS messaging and then, incessantly message them day and night about different promotions and different deals, again, without their consent. And that one is especially harmful to businesses because people can now mark your text messages as spam. So your number can essentially just become blacklisted and nobody will ever get text messages from your business number ever again. So you really want to make sure that you obtain proper consent from people for sending those SMS messages, email marketing, all of that. And I think, in my mind, people think that, okay, if I have 20,000 people on my list and, maybe only 10% of them actually want my messages, I'll still sell something. But in my mind, I'd rather have 100 people on that list that I know for sure want to buy from me, instead of getting marked as spam or having really low deliverability rates or really low open rates. Signing up people for this stuff without them wanting to be signed up doesn't actually help your business.
Yeah,
Kind of sounds like a data hygiene thing too, wouldn't you say, David?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to throw one other thing out there about the consent because I noticed this. In fact, I noticed it on our website when we had a redesign of our website that we had whatever the pop-up that comes up and asks for your consent for tracking. And when people clicked no, the trackers, not all the trackers were disabled. And so some of those trackers were still tracking. And so when they redesigned our site and I was looking at it, and I was looking at it obviously as the CEO of the company, okay, is there anything that's at risk here? That's the first thing that I checked. And so I started looking at some other sites and noticed that there's a lot of sites out there that do the same thing, because what happens is you install this tool that is really just a pop-up tool that's asking for consent. But if someone clicks no, you have to actually generate an action that prevents those trackers from tracking. And so I'd say that is another thing that people should look at. Whoever designed your website, you need to know, you need to test that, and you need to make sure that that's actually working, because just asking for consent is not enough. You actually have to comply to it.
Yeah, well, those services should not be tracking people before they click on the banner at all. So, under most privacy laws, when you go to a website, no non-essential cookies should be firing until the user clicks yes. So clicking no should keep them at the same state of no non-essential trackers, versus clicking yes should allow those trackers to fire. But there's a lot of what we call placebo consent banners out there, where all of these services are firing without the user actually ever interacting, or they fire if they click no. or they just say, this website uses cookies. We're assuming you're okay with that. Click OK, and there's no decline. So unfortunately, there's a lot of really questionable banners out there. So for anybody, choosing a banner for their site, definitely do your due diligence to make sure that it's actually doing what it says it's doing, that it's actually compliant. And then after you put it on your site, you definitely do have to test it. And then if you are putting any new trackers on the site, you have to test that too. So, let's say I didn't have the meta pixel on my site today, but I add it tomorrow. I need to add it to the consent banner and retest it again to make sure that it's working properly.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that term, placebo consent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good. Well, let's move into the final topic. Understanding data privacy laws and regulations. There's a lot there. I mean, you could go into just US, you could go into a particular state, you could go to GDPR. I mean, we'll let you kick us off and kick us up on this entire topic wherever you want to focus, Donata.
Yeah. So there are a ton of different privacy laws out there. First thing, privacy laws protect individuals and not businesses. So privacy laws from other states or countries can apply to you, even if you're not located there. So if you're a business, what you really should be asking yourself when it comes to these laws and who they apply to is, who can submit their personal information on my website? Where are my customers located? Where do I offer goods or services? And who do I track through different cookies and trackers and pixels and things like that when they go to my site? So those are kind of the preliminary questions that you ask yourself to figure out which laws apply to me. So let's say, I have a website, I'm in a business in Chicago, but people from California could visit my site and submit the contact form. Maybe they're inquiring, hey, I'm traveling to Chicago and I'm interested in your restaurant. I want to make a reservation or something like that. Or maybe they can go to your site and have their information collected by analytics and track through advertising pixels. So it's really not about you as the business. It's more about who can visit your site, submit their information, and be tracked. There's a lot of privacy laws that apply to larger businesses only. So you have to have a certain amount of revenue, collect a certain amount of data, or obtain a certain percentage of your revenue from the sale of personal data. But there's also a lot of privacy laws that apply to small businesses. So it doesn't matter how much revenue you make, how much data you collect, or how many employees you have, or things like that. And there's even laws that apply to nonprofits. So you really first need to figure out which laws apply to you, because that's what dictates what requirements you actually have to meet. Because if you don't know what requirements you have to meet, you're already starting off on the wrong foot. And as we discussed before, these laws are always changing. So existing laws are being amended because we have new technologies that are privacy infringing, like AI, for example. And new privacy laws are being passed to provide consumers of certain states or countries with privacy rights. So the requirements are changing pretty frequently. And that includes, the compliance requirements, the policy disclosure requirements, the privacy rights that you offer, and things like that.
So with all of these privacy laws constantly changing and applying into different companies, what would you recommend to listeners that are listening right now and saying to themselves, wow, I don't know if I've thought of all of these things. What would you recommend that would be sort of like their first step, or the top 3 things that they should be considering when it comes to data privacy and their own website?
Yeah, so really the first requirement is figure out which privacy laws apply to you, because that's how you'll know what standards you need to meet, what rights you have to offer. You'll know if you have to obtain consent prior to firing some of these trackers. You'll know what your privacy policy needs to say, things like that. The second thing that I would do is I would review my site and see what can be taken off of it. So just like we discussed before, if you're not using that analytics data, remove that. If you're not running ads, remove the ads. Maybe you have a jobs application form that asks for a bunch of data that you don't have any open jobs, remove that form. Then I would get my policies in place, and I would get the consent solution in place and make sure that those are ready, because that's kind of the first step of what regulators and consumers look at. It's kind of the easiest way to see that somebody is not compliant. You could just see that right away. So on the website, so I'd make sure that I would get those things figured out as well. That's probably the first three things that I would do.
That's excellent. Excellent advice. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. I was trying to make note of them. So I got the first one in the comments, figure out which privacy policies apply to you. Second one, review your site and see what can be removed. And I'm sorry, what was the third one?
Yeah, so the third one would be get your policies and your consent solution in place.
Ah, I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
Obviously, there's more you'll need to do after that, right? So, like if the laws that apply to you require you to offer privacy rights to consumers, you want to make sure that you know what those rights are, how long you have to respond, how to actually like delete somebody's personal information or give them access to it, things like that. So, those are not the only three things you have to do, but that's probably what I would start with.
Yeah, it's definitely a good start for sure.
Definitely. Anything else either of you would want to share on this topic of understanding data privacy laws and regulations?
I would say, it seems very intimidating and complicated at first, and it really can be. But so much of this is just, treating others like you want to be treated. As a business owner myself, I know that if I get a spam text message at 3 in the morning that wakes me up, I'm going to be pretty upset and I'm not going to be interested in working with this company. And a lot of consumers feel that way. We see consumers becoming more and more interested in their privacy rights. And that's why we're seeing all of these laws being passed, is because consumers are fighting for this. And consumers are looking for these privacy features on sites. They're willing to leave a site if they don't see that the site respects their privacy. They're willing to switch to a different vendor. They're not willing to submit their personal data to a website where they don't feel safe. So keeping that in mind, I really think that privacy can actually be a competitive advantage for businesses as well. So even though there's a lot of requirements and it seems pretty complicated at first, if you think about it from a consumer standpoint, and if you think about it from a privacy as a competitive advantage standpoint, it's really just, treat people's data and treat them with the respect that you would deserve.
Excellent. Good point.
It's a great point. All right. Well, the final topic is something we ask all the guests who come on deconstructing data. And that's just, what are some of your favorite tools in your tech stack that empower you and your team?
Sure. Slack is definitely a big one. We used to use Google Chat, if you can believe it, when we first started as a company. And that was fine when there was 2 people, but then we grew to more than that, and it was just like impossible to manage. It was terrible. So we use Slack, which I really like. I do unfortunately use Google products too. So I use Gmail, as well as Google Drive for a lot of my engineering and documents, and all of that other fun stuff. We use Freshdesk for ticketing software, which I really like. And then obviously we use our own products for privacy compliance.
Of course. Got to use your own products for sure. Well, this has been a really great episode. Thank you so much for sharing. Would you like to let listeners know how they can reach you after the show?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Donata Strength-Skillroot. Feel free to connect or message me there. And then you can find our company at Termageddon.com.
Awesome. Donata, this has been a great conversation. I think that our viewers and listeners got a wealth of information. So I thank you so much for that. As did I. And I will be going to Termageddon.com and checking it out. So thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a great show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely such a valuable conversation. And we always love having leaders like you on deconstructing data. So that's all for today's episode. Donata, we appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your thoughts with us. And audience, thanks so much for listening. We will see you back here at the same time next week. So audience members, we want to invite you to get powered by BDEX. Build authentic connections with your audience and drive unprecedented engagement. So just imagine harnessing the power of AI to craft your audiences that truly resonate with your brand, ensuring that your marketing is hitting the mark every time. We want to bring you closer to those marketing goals, and we're eager to guide you. So just visit bdex.com. You can click on the Talk to an Expert button and get powered by BDEX. Deconstructing Data is the show that makes data make sense. Every Thursday, David Finkelstein and myself, Jesse Lezak, sit down with industry experts to unpack how data really drives marketing. We do this in plain language anyone can understand. If you want real insights, real conversations, and zero jargon, tune into Deconstructing Data live on LinkedIn every Thursday at 4:15 p.m. Eastern Time.